Today we're going to be following up from our last episode and actually seeing internal work in action, because I probably didn't explain that well enough last time. In today's example, we're going to have our partner cheat on us, or they're going to leave us and ghost us, or ghost us, and then we're going to find out that they're with someone else. Whatever order we want, whatever terrible situation you want. But essentially, we're getting discarded by someone we really cared about, and we're going to be taking the perspective of the victim, obviously. And this episode is going to guide you through how to overcome this terrible experience. Welcome to session 5 of Living Over Surviving. My name is Noah, and then let's just jump into our scenario. So when things like this happen, we tend to direct a lot of the negative sentiment towards ourselves, right? I'm not enough. I'm the reason they left because they found someone better. I'm the one who never meant anything to them. Or if I were only different in this one way, then they would have stayed or they would have loved me. And we're just discouraged about the future because we see that we see ourselves as unlovable because of whatever insecurity we have. All these things are completely understandable in the moment, and I really don't want to minimize that negative experience. But let's analyze first and understand what actually happened, and we could do that by answering some probing questions. And so, let's begin. Was it a you problem or a them problem? Did they go behind your back despite you trying to be a good partner to them? Right? Was there anyone not communicating effectively? Who let the problems fester before coming forward? Who was the one not communicating concern enough or in a timely manner, and why? Are you guys on the same page for conflict resolution and how to handle concerns? Are there any factors that could impact how they show up for you? Was any sort of concern conveyed and received in a healthy way? Was there effort from both sides to address and work through things together? Were you actually trying to be the best partner you could be for them? Did you communicate effectively and address those concerns with them? Did you do your best to be supportive and show that you were willing to be there and show up for them? Were you both in the relationship for the right reasons? Because you actually wanted to be with that person? Or was it because you were afraid to be alone, or had society or familial pressure? Were you in it for the long haul, with good intent? Or did they have any red flags that you neglected because you felt pressured to be in the relationship in the first place? And again, did you do your best? So we have to get some context into what's actually going on, and not some kind of narrative in our heads about what happened that's clouded by our emotional judgment at the time. Right? We're not trying to focus on the faults of any one side. We're just trying to get a better, more even understanding of what happened in general. And then we can remember that we can't really control people, right? We can't make them love us, and even if we could, then we wouldn't want to, because then that love wouldn't be genuine if we forced them to. And then the whole thing would be a farce and there wouldn't be a point. We want someone who chooses us every time, right? And we want the same for them. We want to choose them every time because we love them. And so the only thing that we could do on our side of the fence is communicate and present the opportunity for them to work with us. That's where it ends. And that's all we could do. Let's remember that if you did your best, if you communicated well and you did all you could, and they still didn't show up for you, there are a few things that we need to realize. That you were not the bad partner. Like, you didn't ruin everything. You weren't the reason everything fell apart. You can't be faulted for their poor decisions or lack of emotional capacity. It has no bearing on what you bring to the table or what value you have as a partner. And I'm sure that you would have loved to have someone who put in as much effort as you did. And if you tried your best to be there for them, and tried to build a life together and help them through whatever, and they still blocked you, that's not on you, because you did your part. If they abandoned you after you did all that, they couldn't overcome some emotional hurdles, and that's entirely her problem. It's really easy to say in the moment that, oh, okay, well, if she wanted to, she would. Or if I meant anything to her, then she wouldn't have done it to me. But if things were fine in the relationship and this change was abrupt and she gave no indication that she would do that to you, and this whole thing is kind of blindsiding, there are certainly some things we can consider, right? One being is that we all have things we want to do but don't. Why? Why is that? We could think of it a lot in our own lives. We all have things we want to do but don't, because there are barriers in the way, right? Whether they be mental or emotional or even external. And so if she were showing up in the past, conceptually, and she isn't now, and nothing on our end of things actually changed, something changed on her end and is preventing her from showing up like she did before. There's clearly some hurdle in the way. And chances are, if it's just an abrupt change and you got no real contextual clues as to why it happened, it's just going to be emotional underdevelopment. And now it's categorized very commonly as avoidant attachment, and we'll cover that more in depth a little later on. But let's try to be objectively aware of the situation and not ruminate on our assumptions. Because then we could take a little bit of a bigger step back and question ourselves in our current state. Like, are you sad that you lost her in particular? Or did you just like the prospect of having a partner and of being loved? Did you put up with more than you should have? And why? Right? What value are we actually trying to extract from this whole thing? Because maybe what you're sad about isn't necessarily having anyone to connect with in that way. We're missing the way that she made you feel. And it only feels like a loss because you were so emotionally invested and wanted that kind of connection, and that's totally reasonable. But we gotta really conceptualize if it was her or the way we felt. Like, which is more impactful? And one of the ways that we could actually think about it is, if we had a pill that could make us feel better right now without them, would we take it, or would we still fight to have them? Right? Then it really categorizes things into our internal lived experience and having them. Because if we take that chance on, okay, well, if everything could just go away, then I'll take that, chances are it was never about them in the first place. Then we got to examine our own motivations for things. And that's where a lot of revelations could come about, which is really, really useful for our future. But if you could say that I took it seriously and I did my best because it was important to me, you also don't have anything to be ashamed of if it ends in failure. Because if this failure came from their negligence, then it doesn't actually say anything about you. All we could do, remember, is to communicate your concerns. And since relationships are a two-way street, they have to be willing to work with you. And this is where it becomes really, really easy, and it's about the black and whiteness of this whole thing. Because when we communicate what we want or what we're feeling, we can see if they align with that. We can't impact their answer. That's on them. If they align, then great. Let's talk about it. We can see how we want to connect. We can give it a shot. We can try and overcome whatever it is together. But if they're not aligned with you, and they're not willing to work with you, and they stop showing up for you, even after we've communicated all these things, it's really out of our hands, because that's something we can't control. Because we can't control other people. The worst case scenario for us is that when we try to communicate these things, and even if it blows up in our face, the worst case is that it's practice at being able to communicate these things effectively and how to navigate a tense conversation, right? You can rest easy knowing that you did all you could. And then the anxiety from that is when we try to take responsibility for their choices about us. If they don't respond well, or even at all, to our best shot at being real with them, then imagine if you had someone like that who half-assed their commitment to you for the rest of your life. Is that a dynamic we really want? Right? And for sure, it hurts now. But now we know what things to look for in the future and what things to value, or at least how to communicate things perhaps a bit more effectively, right? And one tool that's very easy if communication isn't exactly your strong suit, you could always just ask ChatGPT. Like, just make sure you're not using it for every single conversation, but in terms of how to approach a tense conversation, it could at least give you some inspiration, right? In my OneNote, for example, I have a lot of things I've written to people from the past when I've attempted to resolve conflict or articulate things a certain way. And sometimes I'll refer back to them and take little snippets here and there about, oh, okay, well, I like how I worded this, or I could take that from a past conversation and use it here. Being able to communicate in any situation is incredibly valuable. And there's no shame in getting little aids here and there to try and make you hone your skills more effectively. So if you're dealing with a decent person who can actually have these difficult conversations and, not break down at the first sight of conflict, then good. We're in the clear. But if you aren't dealing with someone who is a decent person and they ghost you, or they aren't receptive to what you're putting down, and they just go about the relationship as if you never voiced any kind of concern, I don't think we're actually losing anything, because then we are dealing with someone who doesn't care about our lived experience with respect to the relationship itself. And that's kind of insane, right? Their negative reaction to us communicating gives us a solid idea of whether or not we could take them seriously or not, right? And sure, we could be a bit understanding in terms of this. Like, I get the impression that you are struggling with whatever. Obviously, we don't want to fucking prescribe their problems, but we could definitely call to mind that we think that they may be experiencing a bit of a hard time, right? And you want to get on the same page in terms of how you guys are communicating. And then it also gives you an opportunity to see if there are any ways that you hadn't considered where you could support them, or things like that. And so a clarity like this really relieves us of the thoughts that it was our fault, right? Because, again, relationships are a two-way street. We can't control people. We didn't make the choice. We didn't make their choice to neglect or betray us. If we did all we could, and we had a decent thing going until our person ate shit, and if we're left with no context and things seem to be going great, then they obviously had something internally that they couldn't overcome, right? Because otherwise, if they could overcome it and they could articulate it, then they would have no issues with talking about it. Especially if you are the one who communicated your thoughts effectively, you showed and told them that you were there and are willing to talk about these things and resolve conflict and all that. If the infraction is mainly on their end of things, and we did all we could, it kind of ends there, right? It's not our fault. Their absence isn't reflective of our value or who we are. And it's difficult when we're left without any kind of explanation. And if we're left with no context, no real communication, right? One thing to consider is that there's also no real evidence to confirm that they never loved us or that we aren't enough. I talked about avoidant and anxious people in the last episode and touched on them very, very briefly in this. Avoidants, for example, they really struggle with letting people in, And they're characterized by shutting down when things get too real because they were raised in emotionally insufficient households, right? So they weren't heard or just got shut down when they tried to express emotions or let people in. And so what did they do to cope? They put up emotional walls, right? Walls that normally come down for someone who you're committed to and you want to build a life with. Because this is supposed to be your ride or die that's supposed to know you inside and out. And when this connection deepens, the situation is very naturally felt as if we have to let this person in closer, right? And more emotional intimacy has to take place. But that's exactly the thing that they have a hard time doing. And so that's when they're known to ghost or to cheat, to try and to make some more emotional distance, or to try and just end the relationship out of nowhere, even though things may have been going great. And they do this to force you behind that wall again. Because internally, even if they aren't really cognizant of it, they panicked when they had to let you in. Because when they were small, they were hurt every time they let someone in. And does knowing this actually fix the situation at all? No, it doesn't. Does it oblige us to tolerate their poor behavior and forgive them for basically disrespecting and disregarding anything that we bring to them? No. Is this still a painful experience? Yeah, very. But does this bit of context and do these probing questions to help us get a better understanding of the situation help us in any way? Absolutely. Knowing these things helps us to actually navigate ahead. Because right now, we're on our own, and we did all we could. So all we can really do now is move forward. And it's not like we have any other option anyways. So if we were the ones who gave it our all, and we tried to communicate as best we could, and we tried to at least attempt healthy approaches in terms of conflict resolution, is it a shame that they couldn't meet us halfway for whatever reason? And is it painful? Yes. And we shouldn't minimize that. We should take our time to realize and feel the grief, but these probing questions and getting more context and getting a better understanding of what actually occurred instead of something that's impacted by our emotional response to things, maybe our limiting beliefs, maybe our intrusive thoughts, or all of these things together. We have to realize that this is really just an unfortunate situation, provided that we did everything we could. And at the same time, when moving forward, do you think it would be a good thing long term to keep someone around who treats you coldly or who isn't responsive to your shows of support? It hurts right now, of course, but conceptually, this may not be such a bad thing. Because someone who isn't working with you when you try to resolve conflict, despite your best efforts, probably isn't someone we want to have as a ride or die, right? And this clarity that we get from internal work or being a bit more introspective really helps us to realize that. And now that we're in a time of arguably desolation, because we are without and we feel alone and we feel as if we are insufficient, we can actually take a step back, realizing our context, and think about, were they the catch that we thought they were? Or did we just have rose-tinted glasses? Were we chasing them or the prospect of being loved? And after this bit of reflection, are we going to continue chasing that feeling or prioritize someone simply on the basis that they could love us, as opposed to really vetting someone and making sure that we're involved with people who are willing to work with us and who can have those difficult conversations and who does take these decent values seriously, like trust, loyalty, commitment, open communication, and exclusivity, right? We shouldn't throw these things into the back burner because we just focus on the next thing that could be it. When we have the stability about ourselves and when we have that clarity that maybe we're not as bad as we think we are, that's when we start to treat ourselves way, way better. And so we start screening for people who have these values. Like, do they value open communication? And actually do it instead of just saying that they do. Can they communicate concern and listen to you? And do you do the same for them? Well, if you're watching this, chances are, yeah. How do they approach conflict? right? Can you be vulnerable with each other? Or do you both actually care for and support one another and want what's best for them? Which is what love is, to want what's best for them. Do they demonstrate that they want to be with you and actually put in the effort to show that? And are they reflective on how their actions impact the relationship? And do they take accountability for that? After this reflection, I can guarantee that if you're looking for something decent, then you're at least going to prioritize all the things that we just talked about. And with this 2020 hindsight, could we say that we were in that healthy situation with our ghost, right? Were we putting in all the effort and walking on eggshells, for example, right? Were we trying that hard to maintain the relationship because we thought there wouldn't be another? Were we acting a certain way or, trying to convince them through doing whatever personality gymnastics that they should stay with us? And in doing that, did we tolerate a bit more than we should have? If you answered yes to really any of these, it sounds like you put your eggs into all one basket, like in level 3 happiness, which we've talked about at length already, and it crashed on you, right? We put our eggs into something that could fail, and it blew up in our faces. Granted, there's no shame in that, because shit happens. Absolutely it does. It's practically a rite of passage to have, something similar to this happen. Especially if you come from a household that was devoid of any degree of emotional attunement. For example, how do you think I got this workflow? Because I had a run-in with some bitch. But now look at all the things I learned from it. Right? I don't know if I really would have ended up with all the clarity that I do now if it weren't for that experience. And so I'll go into detail about how I handled it later. But yeah. Subscribe or else I'll cry myself to sleep or something. but even then, it would be dumb because I can't control you anyways. So I shouldn't worry about it. Wow, see, look at that. I think this little reflection here solidly illustrates how getting clarity on our situation really improves everything about our lives, right? From how we think about ourselves to how we move forward to how we even approach other people in the future. And this doesn't necessarily have to be restricted to romance per se. We could take these tenets into our friendships, our relationships with our family members, or even decent people in our workplace, obviously at arm's length. And if it's the case that you were the problem, now you can reflect and take accountability and try to communicate that with them. Because now we have the context that you need, or we have the probing questions that you could answer about what happened, and you're able to take that to them and demonstrate that you've thought about things. Right? Can you heal as a person here? If you were the ghost in this scenario, or you were the cheater? Absolutely you can. Because all you got to do is the internal work for whatever emotional struggles you have, right? Then you get centered, and then hopefully, if you're trying anyways, hopefully that person that you hurt will at least listen to you when you articulate these things, and you try and figure out how you want to move forward, and you figure out how you want things to go in the future, or at least that you're sorry and that you shouldn't have done that to them. All you can do is your best, right? This is going to apply to everyone, regardless of if you're the victim or the ghost in this scenario. All we can do is our best. And that really manifests itself in good communication, right? All we can do is show how we've reflected and impacted the relationship and actually demonstrate that we've taken steps to get a better understanding of things and see if the other person is responsive to that. And if we're the ghost and our victim can't find it within themselves to take us seriously, or they have no interest in doing anything that has anything to do with you, sometimes you just got to take the L. But all you can do is your best, obviously. So change yourself to be better for the next person, and there's no real rush in that. And I don't think we should rush that sort of thing, because this internal development has to come from a place of naturality, right? We can't rush any of this development, and we really shouldn't. We should really take our time with it, be really introspective, reflective, and have our moment to let it sit in. Because we need to internalize all these things before these newfound beliefs could manifest in how we approach new situations. And if you were the one who got ghosted or cheated on, whatever, it's certainly fine if you're still hurt. But now we can at least move on easier, knowing a bit more context into how it happened, instead of ruminating and beating ourselves up over something we likely had no part in playing. Their lack of emotional capacity isn't something that we could take personally or take responsibility for. Full stop. We can't control other people. And if they come back, then the only thing that we need to do as the victim in here, we need to look at ourselves first and get centered. We need to get clarity and stability on how we approach the relationship, how we could have improved things, or maybe whatever insecurity that we have. And we could see if we could take them seriously. If they even come back, If they do, then you got to make sure that they take accountability, and that they showed that they reflected, right? And have a game plan for the future. And then you establish and actually hold those boundaries. Like, I need to make sure that you're communicating with me in this way. Or I need to make sure that you're not ghosting me and, leaving for X amount of days randomly. Or I need you to take conflict resolution a bit more seriously, or be a bit more forthcoming. Your relationship is largely what you make of it. So there are a lot of liberties you could take, but holding your boundaries and, first establishing them are pretty much non-negotiables when trying to mend something in this way. So regardless of our role in the scenario, we can really have a lot of clarity and learn from it, right? We could take our time to heal. Maybe, if we could find it within ourselves, to be more charitable or merciful towards ourselves and each other, and move forward with a healthier approach that discourages us from getting involved with unhealthy behaviors again, right? Both from ourselves and others. Doing this kind of reflection really shows us that we probably didn't take the fat L that we thought we did. And realizing that significantly reduces our recovery time. And if they're not willing to overcome those emotional hurdles, and they leave us and they put up walls and they cheat to establish emotional distance and, whatever, then who actually took the fat L in this scenario? They did. Because they lost someone who did their best for them, who truly loved them and wanted to be there for them, assuming that we did do all those things, maybe even if it didn't come from the healthiest of places, we at least put in the effort to be there for them. And they squandered that. If they're incapable of communicating well and they're essentially just shit at conflict resolution and they break that trust, then yeah, it sucks. But we, as the victim, we don't have to put up with it if we reach out our hand to work on things healthily and they slap it away. It ends there. It doesn't mean there's a problem with us in particular. Of course, the problem is with the person who slapped away an offer at healthy conflict resolution and communication, right? And them not being able to sustain a healthy relationship has nothing to do with us. It sounds repetitive. I'm well aware. But these are the things that we really need to hear multiple times so that they sink in, right? When doing internal work, when reviewing all your newfound viewpoints or trying to drill down into better understanding your own limiting beliefs and how to overcome them and the counterpoints for all that, you're going to be reviewing these things multiple times because the intrusive thoughts are going to come back to try and bring you back into that unhealthy state of mind. Because these are things that have limited you for years. And so it's not exactly, oh yeah, I'll just listen to one of Noah's talks and then I'll be done. Not the case at all. these things take time. And so this is why it's going to be a relatively common theme when we think about what questions we need to ask ourselves to try and get better context on how we can navigate terrible situations, or how we can get a better understanding of what terrible things actually happen to us, so that we can see that we weren't the problem. Or even if we were the problem, that there are ways out of it, or what we could do better next time, or how we could overcome this. And then the only thing we could do there is try and make things right, if applicable, and communicate. And that's it. And if anyone isn't willing to work with you, it's just a matter of finding someone who will, right? And we just need to be honest with them. We need to be honest with ourselves. And we need to just really strive for those things and those values that I talked about in episode 0 and earlier today, and even in the last episode: trust, loyalty, commitment, open communication, exclusivity for romance. And even if things are bleak right now, hopefully this episode will help you to figure out what differences have to be made, either in what we want in the person that we meet next, or in ourselves. And that clarity is how we get centered. And this is how we work on ourselves. It's not going to the gym. It's not getting an increase in pay, because those solutions don't actually fix any of the problems. It doesn't fix our approach to conflict resolution. It doesn't fix our approach to communication, or how we can articulate ourselves. If we're going through a bit of a rough patch in terms of your partner having a hard time communicating, or you're a bit iffy on things, or someone who's a victim of the little scenario here, one thing that I think may be helpful is to send this to them. Or better yet, if you found this helpful, then watch it with them. And then you can frame it. Like, I was recommended this video by someone and I didn't finish it all the way, but it seemed cool. Do you want to watch it with me? It's very, very useful to frame things in a way where it comes from you, right? Like, I get the impression that you may have something going on, or I would like to get a better understanding of what you mean, or what your understanding is of whatever, right? Effective communication is always forthcoming from the person starting it, right? It's never about attacking the other person, or making claims about what they're doing. It's always our perception, and making it clear that we get a certain impression, right? And then they get the chance to clarify things. And then that's how we get on the same page. And when we can send this video to our friends, for example, or someone who struggled with it, and we resonate with them, if we're both new to internal work, you can even listen to this and the episode before it, and it'll do wonders for understanding ourselves, each other, and opening up lines of communication, right? Because then if you're both using the same source material to grow as people together, it becomes way easier, because then you know the approach that each one will take, and you have a better understanding, at least, or have the opportunity to share a better understanding between each other of what you're going through and how each other is tackling their own separate issues. And that is how we all become the goats together, right? And I think that would be pretty cool. And so if this resonates with you, definitely send it to someone who needs it, or, someone who is in your life and requires it. And let me know how it goes. That's it. Have a good night.